Cary Grant. The name itself feels like a smile, like champagne bubbles in a glass, light, elegant, untouchable. But behind that dazzling grin, behind the tuxedos, the effortless charm, and the laughter of the silver screen, was a story far from perfect. A story of loneliness, loss, and a secret that even fame could not erase. To the world, he was the perfect gentleman, but to himself, he was still searching for peace. There are names in Hollywood that glitter brighter than others, names that don't just belong to people but to entire eras. Cary Grant was one of those names. To millions, he was the embodiment of elegance, sophistication, and effortless charm. He made tuxedos look like armor and a smile look like a secret. But behind that perfect posture and those mischievous eyes was a story no scriptwriter could have imagined, a story of pain, longing, and a deep sadness that fame could never erase. This is the journey of the man the world adored, but who in the quiet of night still searched for the boy he once was, the boy who lost everything before he even began. Before Cary Grant, there was Archibald Alexander Leach, a boy born in 1904 in the grey industrial town of Bristol, England. His life began far from the glamour of movie sets and champagne parties. His father, Elias, was a tailor's presser, a man of quiet ambition but growing bitterness. His mother, Elsie, was gentle, sensitive, and deeply attached to her son. Archie adored her. She was the warmth in his otherwise cold little world. But that world was fragile, and in his 9th year, it shattered completely. One afternoon he came home from school and his mother was gone. His father told him she had gone away on a long holiday, perhaps to rest and recover. Archie believed him. Days passed, then weeks, then years. His mother never returned. What Archie didn't know, what no one told him, was that his father had committed her to a mental institution. Without warning, without mercy, he had taken away the only person who made Archie feel loved. The little boy waited for years, holding on to the belief that she might one day come back. That wound of abandonment, confusion, and silence would never truly heal. It became the quiet engine that powered everything he did, every smile he gave, every joke he told, every movie he starred in. Somewhere inside it all was that little boy trying to make the world love him enough to fill the void his mother left behind. He learned early how to hide pain, how to smile when he wanted to cry. He became a performer not just on stage but in life. By the time he was a teenager, he realized that Bristol was too small for his dreams. The world beyond those streets was calling, and Archie was ready to run toward it. He joined a traveling troupe of acrobats and entertainers called the Bob Pender Stage Troupe. They taught him how to tumble, to move gracefully, to entertain an audience. But what they really gave him was escape from the grey skies of Bristol, from his father's indifference, from the ache of a missing mother. When the troupe toured America, Archie saw a chance not just for adventure, but for reinvention. He was 16 years old when he boarded the ship bound for New York City, unaware that the voyage would carry him toward destiny. New York in the 1920s was alive with noise and color. Jazz filled the air, lights danced across Times Square, and hope lived on every corner. Archie performed in vaudeville shows, learning the rhythm of the crowd, the art of timing, the illusion of confidence. He wasn't the most talented acrobat, but he had something else. Presence. People couldn't take their eyes off him. There was something magnetic in the way he moved, in the way he smiled like he was in on a secret the world hadn't figured out yet. Slowly he built connections, moving from one performance to another, from small stages to bigger ones, and with every show, Archibald Leach was fading, and something new was forming in his place. Hollywood came calling not with a bang but with a whisper. A producer saw his charm, his looks, his fluidity, and invited him for a screen test. The studios were always searching for the next leading man, someone who could make women swoon and men aspire. Archie had the look, but his name? Too British, too plain. He needed something sleek, memorable, elegant. And so, with a few strokes of a pen, Archibald Alexander Leach became Cary Grant. The name sounded like silk, easy, confident, eternal. And soon, so did the man who carried it. Cary Grant wasn't just a name. It was an idea. Hollywood didn't just hire him, it sculpted him. They trained his voice, softened his accent, dressed him in tuxedos, and taught him how to be the perfect gentleman. But deep inside, Cary knew the truth. He was acting, even off-screen. Every bow tie, every smirk, every perfect line of dialogue, it was all performance. The boy who had once waited for his mother was now waiting for something else, belonging. Fame brought applause, but not warmth. The world adored him, but he often felt alone in a room full of people. By the mid-1930s, Cary Grant was rising fast. Films like She Done Him Wrong and Bringing Up Baby made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. Audiences fell in love with his effortless humor, his grace, his ability to make romance look both funny and heartbreaking. He was witty, suave, endlessly confident, the embodiment of what every man wanted to be. Yet the irony was painful. The man who looked like he had everything was still searching for something he could never name. Off-screen, Cary was charming but private. He guarded his emotions like precious glass. Friends adored him, women were drawn to him, but few truly knew him. Even in love there was a kind of distance, as if he feared being seen too deeply. He married several times, always with hope, always with sincerity, yet always with a quiet retreat into solitude when things grew difficult. His first marriage, to actress Virginia Cherrill, was brief and stormy. The tabloids speculated, the studios whispered, but Cary said little. He smiled through it all, just as he always had. Behind the elegant smile, Cary struggled with something he couldn't explain. The perfection he projected on screen felt like armor built to protect the frightened boy who still lived inside him. He once said in an interview, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." That sentence revealed everything, the separation between the man and the myth. The world loved Cary Grant, but Archibald Leach was still trying to love himself. By the time the 1940s arrived, Cary Grant had become the most desired man in Hollywood. The Philadelphia Story, His Girl Friday, and Arsenic and Old Lace made him a legend. Directors adored him for his timing, co-stars adored him for his kindness. But when the lights went out and the cameras stopped rolling, he would often retreat into silence. His home was beautiful, his career flourishing, but the emptiness never quite left. He was surrounded by admiration, yet haunted by isolation. It was as though every laugh on screen was balancing a tear off it. As Cary grew older, the boy from Bristol seemed further away, yet somehow closer than ever. He began to reflect on his past, the mother he lost, the father who betrayed his trust, the years spent pretending to be someone else. Fame had given him everything he thought he wanted, but not what he truly needed. And then, one day, everything changed. With a phone call that reopened the deepest wound of his life. His father was dying. And with that news came another, the truth. His mother, Elsie, wasn't dead as he had believed for decades. She was alive, still living in an institution in England. The revelation hit Cary like a storm. For years, he had lived with guilt, believing his mother had abandoned him. Now he realized she had never left him. She had been taken. The pain of that truth was unbearable, but within it was also a strange kind of healing. The little boy who had waited by the window for his mother finally knew the truth. The ghost that had haunted him all his life finally had a name, and that name was love. Broken, buried, but still there. Cary traveled to England to see her. When they reunited, it was not like in the movies. There were no grand speeches or tears of joy, just quiet recognition. Time had changed them both, but in that silence, there was understanding. For the first time, Cary wasn't acting. He was simply a son, finally holding his mother's hand again. That moment marked a turning point in his life, but not the end of his sadness. The perfection he had built could not be undone overnight. Yet now, behind that perfect smile, there was at least truth. And truth for Cary Grant was a kind of freedom he had never known before. Fame has a strange way of rewriting the past. The boy from Bristol, who once stared out at grey skies dreaming of escape, had become one of the brightest lights in the golden age of Hollywood. Cary Grant was everywhere. his face on billboards, his voice echoing in theaters, his name whispered in admiration. He wasn't just a movie star, he was the movie star, the perfect man for a world that longed for perfection. His smile was confidence itself, his charm effortless, his timing flawless. On screen, Cary Grant didn't just play characters, he defined them. But behind that glow was a man walking a tightrope between illusion and truth. Cary's fame grew, but so did the emptiness that fame could never fill. Each success only deepened the silence when the cameras stopped. He had everything the world could offer: wealth, fame, admiration, and yet, in his quiet moments, he felt the same ache he had as a lonely boy in Bristol. The applause faded, but the questions remained. Who am I? Why do I still feel alone? By the early 1940s, Cary was Hollywood's golden gentleman. He made the world laugh in Bringing Up Baby and His Girl Friday, and made hearts swoon in An Affair to Remember and Notorious. His screen presence was electric, every movement graceful, every glance deliberate. Yet few realized how much effort went into that ease. Cary crafted his persona with precision. He studied body language, rehearsed every gesture, every smile. The charm wasn't an accident, it was armor. Hollywood adored his elegance, but few people knew how deeply he guarded his private life. Cary's home was immaculate, his manner controlled, his words chosen carefully. It wasn't pride, it was protection. The world wanted Cary Grant, not Archibald Leach, and he was determined to keep it that way. Off-camera, he was introspective, thoughtful, sometimes melancholic. The glamorous parties and glittering premieres could never quite drown the quiet voice inside that asked, would they still love me if they really knew me? He tried to find the answer in love. Over the years, Cary married 5 times, each relationship beginning with hope and ending in quiet distance. His first marriage, to actress Virginia Cherrill, ended in headlines and heartbreak. His second, to heiress Barbara Hutton, made the tabloids call him Cash and Cary, mocking the union as one of convenience. But those who truly knew Cary said otherwise. He wasn't chasing money or fame. He was chasing connection, something genuine, something safe. Yet each time, as love drew closer, he retreated, unsure how to share the parts of himself he kept buried. He longed for intimacy, but feared vulnerability. To love meant being seen, and to be seen meant risking the pain of abandonment all over again. So he built walls of wit, charm, and sophistication, the kind of walls that looked like palaces. On screen, he was fearless in love. Off screen, he hesitated at the edge of it. As the years passed, his fame only intensified. Directors like Alfred Hitchcock saw in Cary something rare, a contradiction. Behind the polished exterior, there was darkness, tension, mystery. Hitchcock used that quality masterfully in films like Suspicion, To Catch a Thief, and North by Northwest. Cary could be charming and chilling all at once, a man whose smile could hide a secret. What the audience didn't know was that this duality wasn't acting, it was real. By the 1950s, Cary Grant had reached a point few stars ever did. He wasn't just famous, he was eternal. He had become the symbol of what Hollywood wanted to believe about itself: glamorous, untouchable, endlessly graceful. But inside, the cracks were widening. His restless mind began to search for something beyond the glitz, something that could help him understand why the applause never seemed to reach his heart. And then, unexpectedly, he found himself drawn into one of the strangest journeys of his life, a journey not of the body, but of the mind. During the 1950s, Cary began experimenting with a form of therapy that involved LSD, under the supervision of doctors. It was legal at the time and was believed to open emotional doors closed by trauma. Cary wasn't doing it for pleasure. He was doing it for healing. He wanted to understand himself, to strip away the mask of Cary Grant and face Archibald Leach once and for all. In these sessions, he revisited the memories he had long buried: the child waiting by the window for a mother who never returned, the years of loneliness, the constant pretending. He later said in interviews that those experiences changed him, that they helped him find acceptance. "All my life I ran away from myself," he admitted, "but I finally ran into myself." It was one of the rare moments he spoke openly about his pain. and about the courage it took to face it. The man who had once been the embodiment of control was, for the first time, learning to let go. During this period, Cary's career reached a new kind of maturity. He was no longer just a romantic idol. He was a man with depth, vulnerability, and gravity. Films like Charade and North by Northwest showcased his refined power. He wasn't chasing youth anymore. He was embracing timelessness. But Hollywood was changing. The golden age that had created him was fading, replaced by a new era of realism and rebellion. Cary, ever the gentleman, chose to step away while he was still on top. In 1966, after more than 3 decades in film, Cary Grant retired from acting. He said he wanted to spend more time raising his daughter, Jennifer, whom he adored. She was born from his marriage to actress Diane Cannon, and for Cary, she was a new beginning. For the first time in his life, he wasn't performing for an audience, he was living for someone real. Fatherhood softened him in ways fame never could. He read bedtime stories, made breakfast, walked her to school. When he looked at her, he saw the love he had spent a lifetime searching for. But the past never fully left him. Even in peace, Cary remained a man of mystery, graceful, composed, yet distant. He attended events, smiled for cameras, but his eyes often held the weight of quiet reflection. He lived modestly compared to his Hollywood peers, preferring solitude to spectacle. The world still saw Cary Grant, but those closest to him knew he was finally learning to be Archie again. By the late 1970s and 1980s, Cary's legend had only grown. He was no longer just a movie star. He was a symbol of class, of elegance, of the kind of man who belonged to another, more refined time. Interviews with him became rare, but when he did speak, his words carried the wisdom of a man who had lived through fame and found its limits. "I was raised to be charming," he once said, "not sincere. I've spent a lifetime trying to correct that." It was a confession, but also a triumph. He had spent his youth searching for love in the eyes of others, audiences, critics, lovers, but now he found it in stillness. The man who had once been everyone's fantasy had finally made peace with being real. In private letters, Cary often wrote about his gratitude for the simple things, watching the ocean, reading quietly, having breakfast with his daughter. "I've stopped running," he once wrote. "At last, I've stopped running." The boy from Bristol had found something no movie, no award, no spotlight could ever give him: acceptance. He lived his later years quietly, still elegant, still charming, but grounded. He often said he didn't miss acting because he had lived many lives already. "Cary Grant," he joked, "was a role I played for 50 years. It was time to retire him." He smiled as he said it, but there was truth beneath the humor. The man the world had idolized was, in the end, just a reflection of a dream, one that even he knew wasn't real. Cary's relationship with his daughter became the center of his world. He traveled with her, supported her career, and gave her the stability he had never known as a child. Friends said that fatherhood transformed him, that the sadness in his eyes seemed softer, the silence less heavy. For the first time, he didn't need applause, he just needed presence. He aged gracefully, his hair turning silver, his voice mellowing. Time could touch his face, but not his dignity. To his fans, he remained immortal, the man who never aged, who never stumbled. But to those who loved him, he was something better, human. As the years went by, he attended film festivals and retrospectives, often watching his younger self flicker on screen. When asked what it felt like to see those old movies, he smiled and said, "I'm glad he did all that for me." That he, Cary Grant, had become almost a separate being in his mind, the character he'd played for so long and finally learned to let go of. And so, the man who had once lived in shadows now lived in light. He had built a career out of pretending, only to find that truth, quiet, simple truth, was the greatest role of all. But life has its own way of writing the final act, and for Cary, that act would come unexpectedly. In 1986, during a stage appearance in Davenport, Iowa, where he was scheduled to share memories of his film career, he fell ill. The audience never knew that behind the curtain, one of Hollywood's greatest icons, was slipping away. He passed that night at the age of 82, leaving behind not just films but an idea. The idea that perfection, no matter how dazzling, always hides a story. The curtain had closed, the lights had dimmed, but in a quiet theatre of memory, Cary Grant never really left the stage. His passing in 1986 felt like the end of an era, the moment when Hollywood's golden age exhaled its final graceful breath. Across the world, newspapers mourned not just a man but a myth, the perfect gentleman, they called him, the last great star. But those who truly knew his story understood something deeper, that Cary Grant's greatest performance wasn't in North by Northwest or An Affair to Remember. It was in the role he played every day, being Cary Grant. When the news of his death spread, it hit people like a quiet shock. The man who had seemed untouchable, eternal, had finally joined the past he so often embodied. Fans wept not just because they had lost a favorite actor, but because they had lost a piece of what Hollywood used to be, that shimmering world of tuxedos, champagne laughter, and black and white dreams. His passing was the closing of a golden book, written in charm and shadow, laughter and loneliness. In Davenport, Iowa, where he had been preparing for his live stage appearance titled A Conversation with Cary Grant, the stage lights still glowed that night waiting for him. The seats were full, the audience expectant. But behind the curtain, the legend was already slipping away, quietly, as if not to disturb anyone. There was no grand farewell, no last line of dialogue, just a man who had finally found peace. His daughter, Jennifer Grant, later said that she felt her father's presence long after he was gone, not in the echo of applause, but in small, gentle moments. "He's still here," she said, "every time I hear laughter." For a man who once built his life around laughter, its rhythm, its timing, its power, there was poetry in that. But what did Cary Grant truly leave behind? More than a collection of films, he left behind a mirror, one that reflected not just his charm, but the universal longing behind it. Cary Grant represented what people wanted to be, graceful, confident, adored. Yet his real gift was showing us that even the most perfect image can hide pain, that beauty and sadness can live in the same heart. In Hollywood's golden years, the studio system built gods out of men. They gave them new names, new faces, new pasts. Cary Grant was the perfect product of that illusion, sculpted from elegance, wit, and control. But as time went on, he became something rarer, a man aware of his own myth. "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant," he once joked. "Even I want to be Cary Grant." It wasn't just humor, it was confession. Beneath the laughter, there was always the quiet question, who am I when the cameras stop? That question defined his life and his legacy. Today, when film historians talk about Cary Grant, they don't just talk about the roles. They talk about the duality, the way he could glide between comedy and tragedy, strength and tenderness. He wasn't just acting. He was translating his own inner contradictions onto the screen. That's why his performances still feel alive, because they were born from truth, wrapped in elegance. Directors like Hitchcock and George Cukor often said that Cary Grant was their muse, that he brought an emotional intelligence to comedy and a human vulnerability to drama. In Notorious, his eyes carry guilt and love at once. In To Catch a Thief, his silence says more than words ever could. And in An Affair to Remember, when he meets Deborah Kerr at the top of the Empire State Building, the moment trembles with a sincerity that only comes from someone who has truly known loss. That was Cary's secret gift. His pain became poetry. He never exploited it, he transformed it. The loneliness of Archibald Leach became the elegance of Cary Grant. The child who felt abandoned became the man everyone admired. But deep inside, he never forgot where he came from. "I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be," he once said, "and finally I became that person. Or he became me, or we met at some point." In a way, Cary Grant's entire life was a search for that meeting point, between Archie and Cary, between truth and image, between love and fear. He spent his later years quietly trying to bridge that gap. He no longer chased fame or perfection. He found contentment in the ordinary. He would spend mornings reading the newspaper, afternoons gardening or walking along the California coast. He once told a friend, "I used to look for applause. Now I just look for peace." Peace, something he had chased through fame, through marriage, through therapy, finally seemed to find him in simplicity. Those who visited his home in Beverly Hills often described it as peaceful, not grand. The walls weren't covered in awards or movie posters, but in photographs of his daughter and close friends. To him, those moments, a quiet breakfast, a walk on the beach, were more precious than any Oscar. Ironically, Cary Grant never won a competitive Academy Award. Hollywood adored him, but the Academy never fully recognized his brilliance while he was active. It wasn't until 1970 that he received an honorary Oscar for his lifetime contribution to cinema. As he walked onto the stage that night, in his immaculate tuxedo and gentle smile, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. He didn't give a grand speech. He simply said, "I think you all know that I don't deserve this, but I'm very grateful." The crowd laughed, but there was sincerity in his voice. He never saw himself as a legend. He was just a man who had tried to live well. After his passing, something beautiful happened. Cary Grant didn't fade. He grew. Each generation rediscovered him in new ways. Film students studied his timing, actors tried to emulate his balance of grace and vulnerability, and audiences still fell in love with that smile. But what truly kept him alive wasn't just nostalgia, it was relevance. His story, beneath the Hollywood glamour, is timeless. It speaks to anyone who has ever worn a mask, who has ever tried to be what the world expects, who has ever longed to be truly seen. In interviews years later, his daughter Jennifer described how her father always sought authenticity. "He taught me that it's okay not to be perfect," she said, "that real strength comes from kindness." Those who knew him echoed that sentiment. He was gentle, attentive, quietly generous. He supported charities, helped friends anonymously, and always treated people with dignity. Beneath the star, there was a soul who had learned empathy through pain. Hollywood has seen countless stars, but very few leave behind a feeling. Cary Grant did. You don't just watch his films, you feel them. You feel the warmth, the melancholy, the longing behind every clever line. His charisma wasn't just charm, it was connection. He made the audience feel like they were part of his world, even if just for 2 hours. And when the credits rolled, you missed him, like an old friend. As the decades passed, Hollywood itself changed. The old glamour gave way to realism, to grit, to the digital age. But Cary Grant's films remained untouched by time. Watch Charade today, and it feels as fresh as it did in 1963. Watch Bringing Up Baby, and you still laugh as if it were made yesterday. There's something eternal about his presence, perhaps because he was never just a man of his time. He was a man of all time. But the real magic of Cary Grant's legacy lies not just in what he did, but in what he revealed. He showed the world that elegance could coexist with humility, that strength could coexist with vulnerability, that masculinity didn't mean hardness, but grace. In an era where men were expected to be stoic and dominant, Cary Grant made charm an art form, not by overpowering others, but by inviting them in. And beneath that polished surface, he also showed the cost of perfection. His life reminds us that even the most dazzling smiles can hide old wounds. That's why his story continues to resonate with people, especially those who have ever felt they had to become someone else to be loved. Cary Grant's journey was one of transformation, but not from ordinary to extraordinary. It was the reverse, from extraordinary back to human. In his final years, he once said something quietly profound to a friend. "You know, I spent half my life being Archie and half being Cary. Now I'd just like to be a good father." That was his last great role, and his most honest. In Jennifer's memories, he wasn't the Hollywood icon. He was Dad, the man who made pancakes, who laughed easily, who finally allowed himself to be imperfect. As time moved on, tributes to Cary poured in from every corner of the world. Actors like George Clooney, Hugh Grant, and even modern icons like Ryan Gosling have cited him as their inspiration, but none have truly replicated him, because Cary Grant wasn't just a style, he was a soul. His charm was rooted in sincerity, his humor in pain, his grace in humility. You can imitate his tuxedo, his accent, his swagger, but you can't imitate his journey. Film critics still debate what made him so magnetic. Was it the smile, the voice, the timing? The truth is simpler. Cary Grant made you believe. In love, in laughter, in the possibility that somewhere between elegance and vulnerability there existed a kind of beauty that was utterly human. Watching him was like watching sunlight through crystal, dazzling, but never harsh. Today his image still graces film posters, retrospectives, and museum exhibits. But for those who listen closely, there's something else. An echo. The echo of a boy from Bristol who turned his pain into art. The echo of a man who discovered that fame can't heal you but forgiveness can. The echo of laughter that once filled theaters and still fills hearts. As the story of Cary Grant reaches its final frame, it leaves us with a gentle truth. Perfection is an illusion. The world may celebrate the flawless, but it's the flawed who make us feel. Cary Grant's life was not about being without scars. It was about wearing them gracefully. The boy who lost his mother, the man who hid behind charm, the father who finally found peace. They were all the same person, finally whole. So, when we watch him today, that tilt of the head, that glimmer in the eyes, that effortless wit, we're not just seeing a movie star. We're seeing a survivor, a dreamer, a man who learned that the greatest role you can ever play is yourself. In the end, Cary Grant's greatest gift wasn't his beauty, or his fame, or even his unforgettable films. It was the lesson his life whispered to us all, that behind every smile there's a story, behind every mask, a heart, and that even the most graceful lives are often built from broken pieces, stitched together by courage, laughter, and the quiet hope of being loved for who we really are. As the reel of memory flickers one last time, we see him there, standing tall, elegant as ever, a gentle smile playing on his lips. The lights fade, the orchestra swells, and for a moment it feels like he's about to say one last line, but he doesn't need to. His life already said it for him. Good night, Cary Grant, and thank you, Archie Leach, for finally letting us see you.